Good morning, and welcome to what should be a pretty typical day in my life as a former lawyer turned content creator turned business development manager of sorts. For those of you who may be new, I was previously a litigation and arbitration lawyer in private practice for over 6 years before I quit to try to find a career that I actually enjoyed. I then pivoted into full-time content creation before finding my current line of work, which is practice development for barristers. In my last video, I talked about what I learned during this whole process and what practice development for barristers even is. And I actually got quite a lot of questions about my current job and how I went about finding this new career. So I thought I would take you guys along with me on a pretty regular day while I answer some of those questions and talk about how I ended up where I am now. First though, I am starting my morning off with a run and it actually looks pretty decent out. Nothing long because I am recovering from the flu, but I am training for something later this year, so yeah, let's get started. So I usually work from home in the mornings unless I happen to have a morning meeting in the office, which doesn't happen that often. Or more likely, I have some kind of networking related plans such as coffee with a contact or breakfast seminars, etc. I do need to get to work, but before that I'm going to answer a couple questions. And we'll start off with a potentially loaded one because I do know that some of my colleagues watch my videos. So the first question is, do I enjoy my current job? And is there a huge difference from the previous one? The answer is yes, I do enjoy my current job, and no, I'm not saying that because I'm afraid of getting fired if I say otherwise. I'll talk more about why later, but in short it's because I like both the people that I work with as well as the actual scope of the work that I do. For the second question, I assume this is a reference to my former job as a lawyer in private practice. The answer is mostly yes, it's very different, but in a way it's also no. A lot of the actual substance of what I do day to day is definitely very different. As I explained in my last video, my job now is a business development / marketing type role, so I don't handle any legal cases or matters, and I don't represent any clients. I think the only real similarity in terms of the technical aspect of what I do is that I still do sometimes read cases and do some research, but that's pretty much it, and I don't do a very large volume of that. However, I think you could say that in a way, the environment that I now work in is not hugely different. Granted, I do now work in a barrister's chambers as opposed to a law firm, and the structure is very different because barristers are all self-employed, as opposed to solicitors, which are employed by the law firm. But I think aside from that, at the end of the day, I am still a former lawyer who's used to working with other lawyers, so there's many things I'm still familiar with, whether it's the way people speak or think, or people's work styles or personalities even. I think one of the biggest benefits is that having that background really does help me communicate with the people that I work with day to day, and I do think it's a nice thing that I've been able to bring that along with me on a new career path. Okay, time to get to work because I need to finish dealing with some arrangements for an event we're doing later today. So I have a networking coffee that I need to go to shortly, but before that, I want to answer one more question. And that question is, why do I find this career path, aka practice development for barristers, a better fit? So there's a few, but one of them would definitely be the element of creating. For a bit of background, the scope of my current role is quite broad and DIY in a way. It is essentially a new role because I didn't really have a predecessor, and that is something that appealed to me. Of course, there are some responsibilities in my role which are, you could say, more standard for business development type roles in the legal industry, such as doing submissions to legal directories or arranging continued professional development seminars. practice. But beyond that, it is really up to me to shape my role together with Chambers, which is why I also think it particularly matters that I get on with the people that I work with, because it is a very cooperative relationship. Okay, back to the part about creating. Interestingly, I don't know that I would have been able to identify why this career path is a better fit if it weren't for the fact that I pursued content creation after quitting private practice. As I've talked about before, I was always visually creative growing up, and I actually started dabbling in content creation when I was only about 16 or 17 years old, although I'll get into that later. But I ended up putting that aside after the first couple years of law school in order to focus on my legal career. I never forgot how much I liked that though, even though over a decade had passed. So when I quit private practice, I knew that I did want to try pursuing that interest again. As you can imagine, running this YouTube channel was obviously very different from being a lawyer in a law firm, and it really did teach me a lot. And one of the most stark differences was how much of an entirely self-driven endeavor running this YouTube channel was. Unless you've gotten to the point where you have a manager or an editor or a team, it's just you, or me and Lloyd in our case. And once you do hit a certain size and you're picking up sponsorship deals and maybe you bring on a manager or an editor, it's basically just running your own business. It was from this that I learned that while I did love the visually creative aspect of making YouTube videos, I also really loved the feeling of building something from the ground up and having ownership over what I created. Other things I like include that I'm given a good degree of autonomy in my role, which is something I not only really appreciate, but discovered actually suits me better. And I need to run to coffee now, so I'll catch you later. Okay, one more question before I go into the office for the afternoon. And I really like this one because I don't think we've talked about it on this channel before. And that question is, how did you make up your mind in trying content creation or starting a YouTube channel in the first place? And how did you navigate or find your direction in what to try out? Growing up, aside from painting and drawing, I also really liked fashion, definitely influenced by my mom, who is very fashionable. And this was the era of the first generation fashion bloggers on Blogspot and WordPress. After avidly following these fashion bloggers for months and months, one day I was just like, why not start my own blog? And so began my first foray into content creation. The creator economy was still in its infancy at this time, so the whole experience was very novel and also very fun. But more importantly, actually, I realized that creating content made me feel really excited and made me feel alive. Anyways, I eventually abandoned the blog after a couple years of law school when I decided to focus on my legal career instead. Fast forward to 2020, a full year before we actually launched this channel, and YouTube was by far my favorite platform, and it was also Lloyd's. And quite literally, just one afternoon in the middle of COVID lockdown, Lloyd and I were both like, hey, why don't we start a YouTube channel? Honestly, the thought process around whether or not we should do it was not complicated at all. It was more of a why not, and then thinking about what exactly we would want to make our channel about. One of the primary drivers was that we noticed that there wasn't a lot of content, whether on YouTube or otherwise, talking about what it's really like to be a lawyer. We felt like it was, and still is, a highly glamorous career, but in an industry that's not that transparent, and there was a lot of information that we could have really used as students, especially since neither of us had any lawyers in our families which we could have talked to. And that was essentially our why, which was compelling enough for us to overcome the fear and discomfort that comes with filming yourself and putting it on the internet. Anyways, time to do my other work. Hello? Oh my god. That's so good. That's so good. This has absolutely nothing to do with the video. Yeah, Lloyd is 3D printing. Also, if you cannot tell, full disclosure, this is not the same day anymore. Work ended up overtaking my afternoon and evening because some slightly urgent stuff came up. And then it just so happened that Lloyd and I had 2 friends visiting from out of town, and one of them was actually visiting from Tokyo for only 24 hours, so of course I wanted to prioritize seeing him instead of filming. But I think that's about as realistic as I can get when it comes to filming sometimes, especially for this type of day in the life content where it can be really hard to get all of the footage you need in one day, especially when content creation isn't your full-time job. Anyways, before I wrapped up this video, I want to answer a couple more questions. The first question, which was asked in the context of working through an existential crisis, at least in terms of career, was, how do you align your mental states during those down moments while figuring it out and also staying afloat? I will not lie, it is not easy and also pretty messy. An analogy I've used before is that quitting without having another job lined up in order to figure out a new career was like riding a roller coaster, except I was riding it blindfolded. This topic is probably worth addressing in more detail in another video, but I did want to say first that I think the most important thing for me by far was having someone to talk to. When I was in that state, or that stage, I realized that it was actually quite easy for me to get stuck in my own head and spiral and lose perspective. A huge amount of credit, and I cannot stress how huge, goes to my close friends, especially those who know me a long time, and to my sister for their support during this period. It doesn't have to be a friend, of course. I'm not prescribing any particular type of person. It could be a mentor, a professional, etc. I do think, though, that having someone to talk to can make all the difference, whether it's because they know you well or they can provide you with a different perspective. Also, it was actually because of a different perspective that I'm on my current career path. It was actually a very close friend of mine who raised the idea of me trying out my current type of role because of my background, and the rest is history. And that's it for this video, guys, because I feel like it's getting a bit long already. I'm going to call it a night and go analog because admittedly I've gotten a bit bad about using my phone in bed before I go to sleep. So I have been swapping my screen out for some interior design and architecture magazines. I picked some up in Japan recently and also got this in the mail. Anyways, thanks for watching and I'll catch you guys in the next one.